What made me decide to get help? Well, I had reached the bottom. I had actually called the family together to do an intervention on me, and I was sober for about a month, and then I told them that it wasn't working for me and I needed more help. And my wife and I came down to Thelma McMillan without my knowledge of where I was going or what I was doing, and she had me enrolled in the program already, so I really didn't have a choice. What made me decide to get help? Well, the family, I did an intervention on myself and had the family together, and I promised them I would quit. I had a cocaine and a tequila problem. I was spending like $450 a day. I was out of control. I needed help. I thought I was gonna die. I thought my heart was gonna explode. And Carol actually had me all signed up to ready to go into Thelma McMillan without my knowledge. We walked in one day and that's where my journey began. What made me decide to get help? Well, I had an intervention on myself with family, and it didn't work out. And I had another intervention on myself. It didn't work out. What made me decide to get help was I had called an intervention on myself. I had brought the family together. I had cocaine and alcohol issues, and I knew I needed help. That intervention didn't really work. I had another one. I called the family together again, and that really didn't work. And one day Carol brought me down to Thelma McMillan. I knew my journey began the second I walked in that door, and I was so excited to be where I was. And that's when my new life started. What made me decide to get help was I had a cocaine and alcohol addiction, and I had an intervention on myself. I asked family to get together, and it didn't work out. And I talked to my wife about it, and one day she brought me down to Thelma McMillan Center. I walked in the door, and I knew I was right where I belonged, and I fell in love with the place. It was just great, and that's where my journey began. What made me decide to get help was literally I thought I was going to die. I have a alcohol addiction and a cocaine addiction, and I knew I was alcoholic, and I knew I needed help, and I asked Carol for help one day, and she brought me down to Thelma McMillan Center, and that's where my journey began.
When Jim came to me and said he had this very expensive and very large and out of control habit, cocaine habit and alcohol problem, I knew about the alcohol but not about the cocaine. And he told me he would quit on his own, which he tried to do. And once it became apparent that he couldn't, he came to me and said, I need help. And it happened to be that a couple days earlier I'd called a girlfriend and asked her to do some investigating for me about what treatment centers my insurance covered. And one of them was Thelma McMillan. And the phone call here was what started our journey and the life-saving help that we got here. I had my insurance information and I gave it to a friend, a trusted friend who is, has knowledge about insurance and things like that. And I knew I couldn't call from work, make that kind of phone call to find out, where he could go for treatment. And I do believe Thelma was on the top of the list. And I'd never heard of it. I knew Torrance Memorial had a program, but I'd never heard about Thelma McMillan. And so the day after Thanksgiving 2008, I called here early in the morning and spoke with Joanne. And she said, be here at 1, we'll get you guys signed up. And that's what we did. And we came back that night and did meetings, and no turning back after that. It was amazing. I think that what I heard about Thelma McMillan, that they were affiliated with Torrance Memorial, it sounded safe to me. I knew people who had gone through Torrance Memorial's program in the past when it was still at the hospital. And I think it was just God working in our lives that said, try this place. I had 2 or 3 names, and Thelma was the first. And after I talked to Joanne, I knew that I wasn't going to make any more phone calls. This was the place we were going to go to. And, we both felt at home when we came here. We were just welcomed. We were treated like we weren't bad people. You're kind of scared to ask for help. but they never made us feel bad or that we'd done something wrong. It was just, welcome, you're here. You know, this is your new life.
I think we both knew we were at home.
Yeah. So I had 3 names, and I somehow knew that Thelma was related to Torrance Memorial, and we went ahead and called them. And once I made that phone call and spoke with the intake coordinator there, I didn't make any more phone calls. That was it. And we came that same day. We came at 1 o'clock. We met with a few people, and the feeling we got there, the welcoming feeling, the laughter that we heard and that we actually had coming from ourselves, just talking, and it was very natural, and we weren't made to feel like we'd done something wrong. We were welcomed. We were told we could get help there, that there was hope, that we were surrounded by people who have gone through what we've gone through. And for me, that was the best part of it, was knowing that these people had been there, done that, and they would understand our situation and help us get the help we need, and we could get the help we needed there. The reason we selected Thelma is because initially I was given a list of 3 names of 3 recovery centers. I need to start over, I'm sorry.
Stick your head in the drawer and scream.
No. The reason we selected Thelma, initially I was given a list of 3 names of recovery centers that my insurance covered. And Thelma happened to be on the top of the list, so they were the first name I called. And I called that morning and spoke with the intake coordinator, whose name was Joanne, and had a conversation with her that just felt like I was talking to a friend. I felt like I was talking to somebody I knew, somebody that understood what we were going through. And she said, you can come in at 1 o'clock today. So I remember the excitement I felt when I got off the phone and told Jim, let's go, we can be there at 1. They can see us. And so we went and we talked to Joanne, we talked to the counselor that would become his counselor. And in those meetings, those initial meetings, I remember the feeling I had that we were in a place where there was hope, there was laughter, there was recovery, and we weren't being judged. I didn't feel like I'd done something bad, like I had to hang my head. The people there, I found out, were people in recovery who had stories similar to ours, but most importantly understood what we were feeling and what we were going through. So we both felt at home there. We came back that night for meetings and never looked back. The part of treatment at Thelma that I think helped me the most was initially the family groups. On Friday nights, there was a group meeting for family members, and it was led by Jean. And I walked in that very first night that we signed up and was scared to death of what it was going to be. And I had to talk, I had to share something. But as soon as I walked in and sat down and heard other people sharing, I immediately felt at home. I immediately knew I was in the right place, that I could talk about what was going on in my house, that I couldn't tell my best friend. I couldn't tell our family, but I could tell the people at Thelma in the group what was going on, what I was feeling. And so those family meetings were very important. And also the education and family group meetings that I had, that we went to on Saturday mornings, where they provided education. I learned about alcoholism in those meetings. I learned that Jim has a disease that I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, and I can't control it, but I can get help for me. I can get help to recover. And the family meetings with Jim and the counselor, and I loved our counselor. I'm so grateful for him and all of Thelma, but so I would have to say that the part of treatment that helped me the most were the family groups and the education. And at first I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to come every Saturday morning and every Friday night. Not high on my priority list. But once I started coming and opened my mind and my heart, I wanted to come. I started to get excited about coming. We met people, and we made friends with people who were going through what we were going through. The treatment that I received at Thelma that helped me the most as a family member was the family groups where the family members met without Jim there. So it was wives, husbands, parents, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters of patients at Thelma. And we got to share about what was going on in our lives. And I was able to share things with these people that I couldn't share with my best friend or with my family or with anybody else in my life. So that opened up a lot of my heart to the prospect that I could get better, that I could get recovery. On Saturday mornings, we would come, and the first hour was education, where I learned about alcoholism. I learned about the family disease. I learned that it is a disease that he didn't ask to have, and he didn't drink because he wanted to, that he has a disease of alcoholism. And learning about that disease really helped me. And then after that, we would meet with our, what we called family group, where we would meet with the two of us and then other families that are going through it. So it would open up discussions about what's going on between us and how the alcoholism affected our lives. And our counselor, whose name was John, was the most wonderful man. And he was an older gentleman. I could have been my father or my grandfather, but he was also a recovering alcoholic. And to me, when I heard that, that opened up this whole feeling of relief, like he knows, he understands. He's not just somebody who went to school and read a book about alcoholism and is teaching us. He has lived it, his life. And I think all the counselors at Thelma, that's so important, because they're all in recovery of one sort or another. And it led me to open up about the fact that they understand from a place of having been there. I think the part of treatment at Thelma that helped me the most was the family group, which was for family members of the patients, where we got to have an open forum to talk about our feelings, telling them things I couldn't tell anybody else. And then the meetings where we learned about alcoholism, we learned about the disease, we learned that we were not alone. And we also had groups where we met, the two of us, with a counselor. And the counselor would dive into things going on between us that I would never, ever want to share with anybody, or even share with Jim. You know, I was so closed down and shut down about talking about my feelings. And the counselor was able to bring those things out, and we could talk about them in a safe place to each other without fear of anger or hurting each other. It was a very safe place to deal with very hard issues.
Why did I continue to come to Thelma after I graduated? It's real simple. I was terrified. I was terrified of my addiction. I was afraid of the world. I found out that I had PTSD and other symptoms as well. And I knew Thelma McMillan was a safe place for me to go to talk about what was going on with me. My counselor, my gender group counselor, was a great man. I'm still in touch with him. It was just amazing for me to get to be a part of that, and that was a safe place for me to go to. Why did I continue to come to Thelma after I graduated? It was real simple. I was terrified of the world. I was terrified of my addiction. I had been addicted for 99% of my adult life. Terrified of the world and terrified of relapse. So I knew if I went back every week, I was going to be able to see my counselor, which he knew everything about me, and I knew him really, really well, and it was starting to turn into a friendship more than just a counseling. And, Thelma McMillan was my home. It's where I felt safe to be.